And sorry to hear about all the struggles in Holland at the moment. Siets, my parents were talking as well about only one person allowed in the house and the curfew and a lot of riots in Holland, which apparently has nothing to do with Corona specifically. I understand, but maybe it's still related. I don't know, but
I think it's some severe trauma reactions. And it's collective trauma. And as long as you start blaming the people who are part of the riots, nothing will happen.
Yeah, so but my parents liked it very much that the king came to Den Bosch to all the, shop owners and people who were, severely, their property damaged, etc.
Yeah.
So at least, the
he's
king acknowledged it. Sorry?
Yeah, he's been very absent.
Oh, has he? Oh, yeah, because my parents said that he came to Den Bosch and they were really happy about that.
Yeah, but that's the first thing we saw of him for the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
I thought he was still in Greece.
Yeah, exactly. They had to fly back. Yeah, so it's a pity because being in the position of a king, you could take up some kind of leadership.
Yeah.
And in a way, we're paying him for that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, and just visiting people who've been damaged, it's not so good. But to me, the most scary thing is the curfew. Yeah. Living in a country where there's a curfew is really doing something. And of course, this is also a trauma response, which leads directly to World War II. Yeah. But it's really something. And being only allowed to have one visitor in the house, that's okay. I understand that, but the curfew is really difficult.
I think it's also different because I think in Melbourne, did you guys have a curfew in Melbourne?
Yes, we did.
Curfew doesn't mean the same thing in Australia as it means in Europe. So it would have been a very different experience in Melbourne for Australians who didn't experience curfews in the war versus immigrants who have experienced curfews in political unrest in their countries. So it's interesting in Australia, different relationship with curfew or mixed relationship with curfew and what it means. So,
yeah. Good observation, Sarah, because I think the people who did react a little bit are people who have immigrated from somewhere else and have that ancestry, those connections. Yeah. But generally, yes, I'd have to say the Victorian government, it got away with something that was amazingly kind of complex very easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So a little bit of resistance, but more at the end of extreme rather than in the mainstream. Yeah. And, who knows that the extreme ones weren't a voice for that which was not being spoken about or attended to, so they could have definitely been taken in service of bigger forces.
Yeah, because I find it, being from the Netherlands, such an extreme, the response I hear in Holland, the country where I'm from, my roots, my parents, my family's there. And then Australia, where everybody's so obedient. Siets, you don't believe it? Everybody is so obedient here. They never challenge the rules and the laws, or they dob you in that you haven't followed the rules. I mean, that's so not being Dutch. So that's really interesting from my perspective.
Yeah. I keep thinking about Gandhi and his lessons about passive resistance, which also are about, as a civilian, you have the duty to openly withstand bad government. So if your government creates bad policies, creates bad laws, you have the obligation to protest to it openly and not obey them.
Yeah, in Australia, there's definitely that English passive aggressiveness rather than the active, open, speak out policy.
I think there's something more to it that most of Australians' roots, as in non-Indigenous, which, by the way, we've actually perpetrated on the Indigenous people, is oppression from authority. So to challenge authority is very risky, but to passively resist it and not do it as a whole community, but do it individualistically if you can look at our roots, you start to understand some of that behavior a bit differently.
Yeah, I've just been reading the book of Jan Jacob Stam and Barbara Hogenboom to do with systemic leadership coaching. And in chapter 4, because we've just been reading that about patterns, it talks about the pattern in Australia. And I thought that was really fascinating as well, because there were convicts coming from the UK. They were of course, sort of small criminals, because they'd stolen bread and stuff like that. With the idea they go to the island for 3 years or so, and then they come back, because then the conviction is over. But that coming back was never allowed. So the promise was broken. So there is a distrust in leadership. But at the same time, everybody's obeying. So it's sort of, yeah.
No.
That is some kind of the dynamics you see here in Ireland.
Yeah.
Which is still completely different. Everyone is submitting, but does anyway what they think they should be doing. So which is a reaction underneath, linked, I'm sure, with the British oppression.
Yeah. So that's why I at the moment the discussion is really there in Australia. Should we still be a monarchy? Having the English Queen, or becoming a Republican? I'm very much a monarchy from the Dutch perspective, but from the Australian perspective, I think it will be much more deliberating if they get away from the English Queen, from a different angle completely, and also from a be united with the Aboriginals, because I think that also will never happen until there is a major shift. But okay, anyway.
Complex issue.
In many ways, what you're touching on, Siets, I think is a beautiful segue into what we were talking about. Siets and I were talking about what are we noticing, and what I was sharing with her was I was noticing, and the way it connects with this conversation is how do we continue but have a new beginning? It's like it's a continuation. And what I was noticing was this almost wanting to reject 2020. Thank God it's over, and let's have 2021 be something new. Yet it's a continuation, because COVID hasn't left us. And even as I'm hearing us talk about this now and thinking about just even the reference to the past that is not over, it still is attached, and it still has a meaning, and it is in fact still expressing itself. And when we think about that systemically, what Siets offered me this lovely metaphor of, that electric maze game where there's a wire that's electrified and it's misshapen, and you've got to take the ring along the wire to find your place. And Siets said to me, oh, it sounds like the Christmas New Year break was a resting point, where there was no electrification, you could rest for a moment. And what I'm noticing both in myself and in my clients, as I'm engaging with them at the beginning of 2021, is how do we actually regroup? How do we, and we could rush forward and not attend to the past and sort of reject it and deny it and separate ourselves from it. But what if we were connected to it in a way that generates wisdom and perspective? And then we could actually regroup and get really connected in a way that we're connected both with ourselves and our resources, all of our resources. We're fully connected to all of our resources. And we're not leaving anything behind that's important to take forward. But we are leaving behind that which needs to be left behind because it's not useful going forward. And so could we take this point in that to really get connected with all of our resources fully and be really cognizant of our context. So COVID's not going away. It's not suddenly evaporated. It's actually, how do we live with this so we don't get a shock every time we touch something, but we can actually now together navigate that electric maze because it is our context. It is what we have to deal with, and not go into shock and trauma and overreaction, but rather be fully resourced. And therefore then we can move forward and discover what will emerge from this, that we are moving towards our future, and how do we do that fully resourced, even though we don't know the twists and turns that are ahead of us. So
and Sarah, we've got an interesting situation here in Australia, in Western Australia, where COVID has turned up, and that community doesn't have access to masks or anything. So isn't it, what I think what you're saying here is it's going to be these kind of examples that pop up to remind us. Sorry, I interrupted you, but
it's perfect. Lovely. It's a conversation. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And Siets, I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's just one COVID case in Perth, which is somebody who is helping in quarantine hotels. And then immediately the whole Perth or a whole state is in lockdown.
The whole state, which is just short of, well, it's over a third of Australia.
And the interesting thing is that Perth is the most isolated city in the world. So I think they thought they were going to be, exonerated and free from all of that. And I have a friend from Melbourne who's over there at the moment, and she said that folks, anyway, they've just been thrown into chaos.
Yeah. So it's a full shock reaction and the full contraction that goes with the shock reaction. And I think Siets and I were also talking about one of the difficulties in the Netherlands with the government changing things all the time, so then people don't trust them. So, and of course that can have an escalation effect. If you can't trust your authority, as we were talking about, when you don't trust your authority, what impacts does that have, and does that actually generate chaos? And
what I hear from my Dutch friends is the whole time, but the government can't do anything because by our right we are allowed to fly to other countries in Europe, the Schengen deal, so many things. No, it's our right. They can't do anything to us.
Yeah, so it's also, where do we go? Are we in contact? Are we fully in contact with our resources, etc., when we respond? So Siets and I just wanted to do an activity that really speaks to that. And because we can talk a lot about out there, but what are we actually doing in here? That means that we can step into that fully resourced and actually be an impulse in the system that's towards integration, that's towards, it's a healthy movement.
Yeah, and you can say anything you want about COVID, and probably everything you say about it is true. But it's not about COVID. It never has been about COVID. And I think COVID is a very clever reaction from one of our biggest systems in order to reshape our world. And thinking like this really puts me back in contact with my own movement, with my own health, with my own creativity, with my own dreams for life, dreams for my children. So we've designed a little process, and we would like to invite you to take part in this process. Just undergo it. It just takes a couple of minutes. And then after this process, we can further exchange with each other, because I think there's so much to be shared with each other on different sides of the world, many different countries here, or from Europe and also Australia. So what I would like you to encourage you to do is to turn off your camera. And you might even want to turn off your microphone. It's up to you. And I ask you to turn off your camera so you can feel yourself. You can connect with who you are, and you can best organize the quality of your presence. You know, nobody's watching you. You are there in your own world, wherever you are, in which part of the planet. And then I would like to ask you to decide, what is this new beginning for you? What are you inviting from the future to connect with you? What is it you want to add to your life? And just decide, what is it you want in your life? But before we continue, reflect on which basis have you chosen? Is it in response to something else? Like the feeling not being good enough, or being too much, or bad decisions are taken? Is it in response to something else? Choose wisely. Decide what you want to live with based on what you are ready for now. Decide what you want in your life because the time is right. And then in your mind's eye or in a physical form, choose an object or a place in the room you are that can represent this. Choose an object or a place in the room where you are that can represent this.
So we want to connect with this thing that you want and notice in your body, notice within yourself anything that might be holding you back, something that somehow constrains you, something that you've learned perhaps that it's not possible. It's something not available. It's not allowed. Something that prohibits you in some way from moving towards this. You will know which is your way of being constrained. You'll know because you've said it. It's in your thoughts, or it's in your language, or it's in your stories. And pay attention to your body when I say this, and notice what you notice in your body. Your body's speaking to you all the time. But take this moment to be aware of what's present in your system and in all of the systems that you're connected to, the systems in your background. And just notice how these systems might be constraining you in some way. And love those. Whatever pops up, whatever you notice, look at it gently, look at it kindly, look at it with compassion. It has been there to take care of you. It may no longer do that, but it has taught you things. It has generated gifts and capabilities in you. and turn to these things and express your gratitude. Thank you for what you have given to me. Thank you for taking care of me. And now it's time for me to be free from these things. I have learnt what I needed to learn, and I have harvested the gifts I needed to harvest. It's time for me to grow into what's waiting for me. And maybe in time, I will come back and share with you my future. And then make a turn away from these to face towards your goal, the thing is that you want to bring into being.
You face towards your goal, perhaps the object or the place in your room, and just remain present. And let your presence have a light quality with full attention. Don't be focused, but just let it be there. Just let it be there. And then you wait. You wait until you are moved. Wait until you are movement. The movement is coming from outside. And when you feel the movement, then wait a little longer. Hold back the movement for a moment, as it were, until you really cannot do otherwise, until you cannot withhold it anymore. And being moved is only possible when you renounce any claims, when you renounce any duties or promises. And if you renounce these, you will become available. And when you're available, you can be moved. Refrain from claims, forgo duty. Wait until you're moved. Hineni, I am here.
When you feel the connection, look back in your mind over your shoulder. And simply say in your mind, I just came back to show you what found me. Everything that I have learned, everything that has formed me, everything that you have given me, I take with me and allow it to blossom into the fullness of possibilities. It's time for me to leave. Thank you. And then in your mind's eye, take a step forward when you feel, when you sense, when you know it's time.
And here we are in the new present. In the new present, connected to the future, connected to what is emerging, being available, not forgetting, not denying, just be available. And Sarah and I are available for you to share your experience if you like. But it might also be helpful to just be silent for a couple of minutes, or to make a drawing, express your experience in such a way, or to stretch out, or to take a walk outside. I don't know what is possible. I don't know your body. You know your body best. So take good care, and choose how you can integrate this process the best in your body. And you are very welcome to turn on your camera again if you want. You can also leave this meeting, whatever is best for you. You're very welcome to turn on your camera again and to share with us your experience. And to me as a person, it's extra important, because one of the things that frightens me most at this moment in the Netherlands is that not all voices can be heard. So I very much invite you to let your voice be heard and share something of your experience if you want to.
What popped up for me was it's very. I'm not in Holland at the moment, and yet the curfew was something that I didn't even realize, but I was kind of like living it as if we were in a curfew. Well, we have a lot of other restrictions, but we don't have a curfew. And with this exercise, I realized that the presence of the war. My grandmother, she was in Rotterdam at the time of the war, and after the war, she got married, but her system froze. She has been lying in bed. She was sick in bed for, I think, 30 or 40 years. And which is a very natural reaction then in a freeze. And I realized that the fact of the curfew being there without it reactivated that freeze of not moving, not being able to enjoy life. And it was funny. I took as an object, I don't know if you can see it, it's a jumping rope guy, and I was wondering what is that from the future that wants to find me? And it's really that playfulness, that enjoyment, and the body being reactivated in all its ways. And I understood better where it came from. And then diving a little bit deeper, there was my grandfather from the other side, who had been in war in a Japanese camp, and who I only remember as sitting in a chair. So I understand why this, the playfulness and the movement within the body wants to find me, so that it can all start to flow again. So that was really, I think it's really powerful to get that movement back.
Awesome. Do you have a jumping rope in the house?
Well, I have trampolines. I just got skiers, and so okay. Jumping rope will be added.
Thank you, Saskia. Thank you. So anyone else who'd like to add, likes to hear his voice being heard? Or hers, of course. You can just turn on your microphone and we'll listen.
I'll say briefly, what I was drawn to was this plant on my shelf. And the reason I was drawn to it is because it doesn't try.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't try hard, and try hard is a strong message from my upbringing, is all you have to do is try hard. And the plant can't try hard. You know, it can only respond to what it's given and to what happens. So that's my wish for myself, is to be able to respond and go with, you know, what's happened, and to give myself enough sustenance that I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Claire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyone else before we close?
I'm Robert.
Hi, Robert.
Let me dive in. What I'm choosing is what's present, and it has a sort of an overarching or an expansive quality of just being ever present. And when you asked, you know, pick an object in the room, there was this natural, well, the chair I'm in, because that's what's present. I'm here. You know, nowhere to go, nothing to do. I'm just present. And the reason I'm sharing or speaking is when you asked, which I thought was valuable, was what's stopping me, is fear. And, you know, fear of claiming, fear of stepping forward, fear of opening, fear of being present. And, you know, typically I would not contribute because it's safer, easier for me to not feel anxious. And so, you know, it seemed obvious and natural to go, okay, well, if I'm present, then I'm present in whatever I'm feeling right now. And then my heart can open into that. So thanks for the process.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your fear. Yeah. So I think it's time to close up.
Yeah, I'm just noticing actually, Siets, we started with a lot of energy and a lot of, and we're ending with a lot of stillness. And it connects me with the only way that we can possibly be in touch with the system, and everything that's going on in the system is from this place of stillness. And yeah, the question that's for me is how might I take this impulse that we've created together here into my day and into my week and into my work and into my life, and how might this be an impulse that ripples through all of the systems that I'm in touch with. So I'm deeply grateful that you all joined us to create this impulse, certainly for my system and for all the systems that you touch. Yeah. So I look forward to our next connection in 2 weeks' time. Yeah. Go well.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's been really nurturing for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.